Hi, this is Casey Renshaw, and this is my media clip project for the final in Educating Exceptional Students. I'm going to discuss the different exceptionalities that we talked about throughout this semester, as well as the social, cognitive, intellectual, and academic characteristics of these students, as well as the universal design and differentiated instruction that you can use throughout the classroom for these students and all students in general. So the first exceptionality that I'm going to discuss is students with ADHD. So socially, they do struggle a little bit. The predominantly inattentive type have difficulty paying attention to details, following instructions, and avoiding distractions, whereas the predominantly hyperactive impulse type have difficulty staying seated, keeping hands and feet to themselves, and talking excessively. So they do struggle with all of these things, and which does cause problems socially for them. Intellectually, students with ADHD are just as likely to be identified as gifted students than typical students. And so a lot of people hear that if someone has ADHD and they automatically assume that they are not good in school or that they struggle a lot more, but that's not necessarily the case. These students are just as likely to be gifted as other students as well. But however, their academic achievement, students with ADHD have lower academic achievement, lower GPAs, but they do have higher retention rates. Despite these academic challenges, students with ADHD do have a variety of strengths. For universal design, I discussed how teachers should really focus on organizational skills. Students with ADHD typically struggle with being organized, and so I think a teacher should focus on keeping their cubbies, their areas, their desks, everything around them organized so that they know where everything's at, it's clean, it looks nice. I think that would really help students with ADHD. They should also self-monitor and check their work to make sure it meets the standard by the teacher. It's really important to go back over their work, to review things, and so making sure they're self-monitoring that, not only that, but their behaviors as well, can really help them. In the classroom for differentiated instruction, I think that the teacher should just really keep the class well organized. If students with ADHD see that everything around them is clean and neat and organized and the classroom is run well and there's a really good routine going, they're going to see that and they're going to want to be organized as well, and it will really help them see what it's like to be organized. And so the second exceptionality that I'm going to discuss is students with autism. So these students, they do struggle quite a bit socially. They tend to interrupt others, focus attention only on one topic. They tend to repeat or echo other people's language. Students with autism do tend to be isolated. Only 1 out of 5 autistic students have a reciprocated friendship, which makes me really sad, and to know that these students do struggle socially because of the things I mentioned, interrupting others, focusing only on one topic, and so they do struggle socially. Cognitively, they have a broad range of language abilities, ranging from no verbal communication to complex communications. So there's a huge range of where they fall in that category. Intellectually, they range from students who are gifted to who have intellectual abilities. So it's kind of like students with ADHD. There's a big range, and the students can have intellectual disabilities, but they could also be gifted. And so it's a big range. The strongest predictor of the severity of autism symptoms is IQ. In the classroom, so universal design for learning, I believe that teachers should really focus on memory strategies to help students learn and retain more information. I think that would really help them remember and just help them learn in general. Differentiated instruction, I would recommend doing flexible grouping to help these students with autism really get out there, meet new people in their class, get to know them, be able to communicate with a variety of people. I think this would really help, whether they're working individually, in pairs, groups, as a whole class. Just having that experience talking with these students can really help them make friends and just learn how to be better communicators in these social interactions as well. So the third exceptionality that I'm going to discuss is students with communication disorders. So these students, they definitely have challenges with social interactions. They have difficulty pronouncing words, stuttering, and so many more things can be difficult for them. And so they do struggle in social interactions. Cognitively, their language development begins early and is very complex. By the age of 8, children have learned to produce nearly all consonants and vowels. that make up the words of their family's native language. And so students with communication disorders do struggle with that growing up from the very beginning. And so intellectually, like I said, they do struggle with communicating. They do struggle in school because of these impairments, but they really, it's just difficulty pronouncing words, stuttering, things like that when they're speaking. They also have problems listening as well. The universal design, I believe you should modify how the content is presented. So if students have trouble communicating, have different ways of them to do things. So if they have trouble getting in front of a class and presenting, have them record themselves and then play it in front of the class, or even just for yourself. Or if they have trouble hearing, then write the instructions on the board. There's so many different ways that can help these students as well as students in general all throughout the classroom. Differentiated instruction, kind of the same as students with autism. I like the idea of doing flexible grouping so that the students are meeting new people, they're being able to communicate with new people in a variety of group settings, whether it's in pairs, the group work, or whole class. I think that would really help, as well as the variety of instructional approaches using audio or text formats, visual representations, so many different things. The next exceptionality that I'm going to discuss is the students with emotional or behavioral disorders. So these students do struggle socially as well. A lot of these students with emotional or behavioral students have anxiety, which causes a lot of social challenges. Cognitively, students with emotional or behavioral disorders may be gifted or have an intellectual disability. So with a lot of these disorders and disabilities, it doesn't stop them from doing anything. They can still be super smart and talented and be gifted, or they can have other disabilities that make them struggle a little more. But these don't stop them from doing anything, especially in the classroom. But their academic achievement, these students fall below the 25th percentile on reading, math, and written expression, and only 38% of students with emotional or behavioral disorders graduate with a regular diploma, which makes me really sad, and I think it shows that we really need to focus on these types of students a lot more. We focus in the classroom how to deal with students with ADHD, autism, all of these disabilities, but the emotional or behavioral disorders come from home. They are struggling with things outside of the class that teachers and a lot of people don't know about, and so they need that extra help, and they need modifications that will help them get through this. So I think we need to focus on that a lot more. I really like the idea for universal design of learning using technology and allowing them to self-monitor themselves and track their performance. I think this is good for any students, no matter the age, no matter the disability, anything. It can work for all students, showing them a graph of how they've done the last week, whether they've done better in classes, whether they've done worse, how they've changed over the semester. I think this will show them like, oh wow, I haven't done that good this week, why not? And it'll kind of help them realize some of the things that they need more help with, or that they are struggling with, and they can kind of self-monitor themselves that way. For differentiated instruction, many emotional and behavioral disordered students leave school. Like I said, only 38% of them graduate. And so assessing them on an ongoing basis is very important, especially with differentiated instruction. Having them monitor themselves as well as the teacher so that you know exactly where they're at and whether they're progressing or not. The next exceptionality that I'm going to discuss is students with learning disabilities in general. So socially, there is no such thing as a typical student with learning disabilities. They are very different because they can have so many different disabilities. And so you can't just put them in one category because there's so many different ones. Intellectually, they almost always demonstrate low academic achievement. And so we really need to focus on them more, these types of students with these learning disabilities. Even though they demonstrate low academic achievement, they commonly have average or above average intelligence, which I think is really cool. And I think it's cool with all of these disabilities that they can have these disabilities and disorders, but still be on top and be gifted. But academically, about 20% of students with learning disabilities have academic weaknesses in both reading and math. And so 20% of these students struggle with math and reading, and so it's important to allow them extra time to focus on these. But for universal design, the book talked a lot about advanced organizers that help students anticipate the relationships between their prior knowledge and the new curriculum they must learn. I think that's a really good way to help students think about everything and figure out what they're learning. Differentiated instruction for students with learning disabilities, I would just say make lessons engaging and meaningful. With students with learning disabilities tend to struggle focusing, and so I think it's important to just make the lessons fun and meaningful so that the students are having fun while they're learning and it's easier to pay attention. But the next one I'm going to talk about is students with multiple disabilities. So these students, they're hard to put into one group like the learning disabilities because they are all very different. Students that have multiple disabilities usually have specific characteristics related to their intellectual functioning, adaptive skills, motor development, communication skills, and many more. Socially, many of them have communication impairment, so they struggle talking with people, talking in the classroom, making friends. So a lot of them struggle with that. Intellectually, they can function intellectually at the normal or even gifted range. So just like the other ones, they have this disability and maybe more than just one. However, they can still function at the normal or even gifted level, which is awesome. For academic achievement, they're not completely engaged in communicative interactions during school. So I think it's important to get these students involved with the interactions in the classroom so that they get more experience communicating with them because they do struggle with that quite a bit. These students are able to make progress in the general curriculum, so they do well in the regular classroom. When it comes to math, literacy, science, social studies, they do well. They're just not completely engaged in communicative interactions during school. The universal design for these students, I would say use technology that allows students to work on different things at once. And so if they're doing different topics, the student can watch a video on their iPad about their topic. The student can write a report. The student can just find a game about it. There's so many different things. Because these students are so different, you have to have different modifications for when you're teaching. And so I think using technology that allows them to work on different things at once really helps, like researching topics, watch tutorials, use digital instructions or prompts, so many different things. But differentiated instruction, I would say alter assignments to meet the needs of students. So like I just said, using technology that allows students to work on different things at once, allows them all to be working on something, even though they're completely different, but it meets the needs of them. It's exactly what you're doing by using the technology. So this was my PowerPoint over the Media Clip project. Thank you.